for recording to the cloud. Jess, but my internet connection isn't quite stable enough. Welcome to the show and tell for digital innovation in GIS. It's a bi-weekly event. Charlotte is sharing her screen. We've got two presentations, Charlotte and Aaron doing the community approach update, which is one of the kind of regular ones. And then we've got Ross and some of his team possibly doing a smart office with independent living, how they're using laptops in the field. So on that note, over to you, Aaron, Charlotte.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And hi, everyone. Yeah, great to see lots of people here today. Apologies for my hoarseness. As mentioned before, maybe some of you joined us at Wembley last week, so apologies for the croakiness. As you can see in front of you, we're going to be looking at how we've defined our target audience this week. I'm going to give a really quick intro now, and Charlotte will jump into a bit more detail around that. But just as a recap, or for those of you that join us for the first time, we've picked up this work. Well, we commissioned it at the beginning of last year, but due to the redeployments, we didn't pick it up until September, October time of last year. So we commenced doing the work then. Really, what we're looking at is how the community, how the organisation can be more community-led. So looking at the Venn diagram in front of you, we're looking at establishing the needs of the community, where we currently work in terms of our free calls and the service lines that we offer, and how that overlap can be slightly better managed. Find our space. And so, yeah, in terms of our approach, we started to scope the work when we took it up at the back end of last year, and then ran a discovery up until last month. We've now started to get into testing. So we've been testing this last week and doing some initial testing with some of our teams and volunteers. And we'll now be moving into, as we'll tell you a bit later on, going out into the community and testing with them from next week onwards. So where we're doing the work is across, as Gordon's mentioned, in Nelson in Lancashire, down in South Wales in Neath, and in Camborne in Cornwall. So we've got team members, innovation officers that you met Cara a few moments ago, based in each of these locations, embedded into the community to really help us get to grips and get those networks formed. But I'll pass you over to Charlotte to talk through how we are defining the target audience before I come back in a bit later.
Oh, thanks, Aaron. So as Aaron said, we're working across 3 areas of the UK as we look to understand and develop things. But it's important to know that whilst we've spent a lot of time learning as much as we can across the whole community, that it would be like almost impossible to design something that works for absolutely everyone who lives in Nelson, every person who lives in Neath, as well as design something that fits every single person in Camborne. It's a really broad range of people for different backgrounds, experiences, wants and expectations from things as well. And to give that a bit of context of why I mean quite how big of a task that would be, and potentially also a very risky one, is if you're designing something, you came up with one of these entrepreneurial ideas that maybe some of us have thought about on a Sunday night and thought, I've got an idea that could really make a difference in the world, or I'm going to make my next million. And you said you want to design it for all women. This would be hugely impossible to do, because if you think about every woman that we have across the world, from different experiences, upbringings, wants, goals, all these different parts of it, it would be really difficult to make anything successful if that was your target audience. Whereas something that would be a lot more successful and a bit more targeted would be something like this. So women who live, who are 25 to 45, living in a rural area and likes tennis. So by having that focus, it means that you can actually start to really understand who you're designing for, make sure you're really meeting their needs in any experience, but also it takes the risk out of it, because by trying to design to meet everyone's needs, there's a high chance that you're not going to meet anyone's expectations. So when thinking about where we're going to start, we thought back to something that Leslie Pinder often says from the supporter experience team, which says start with your warmest audience. And this is something that they do really often in both the fundraising innovation team and the supporter experience team. And a good example of this is Miles for Refugees. So Miles for Refugees, some of you may know that in one of its first years, many of the people who fundraised were actually our own internal staff, because they were a warm audience. They got the goal, they got the need, they understood the direction of where the funds would go and the impact that that would create. And because they started with that warm audience, Miles for Refugees saw a 15% uplift in activation from supporters because it started with this internal audience. So the interest was there and grew out from that starting point. So who are our target audience and collaborators? You'll notice I said collaborators as well, because as the team who are looking at how we can be more community-led, it's important that anyone who is working and experiencing what we're doing will also be able to help shape it. And for that, we thought about that we think that our warmest audience in our 3 towns are our local British Red Cross volunteers. And there's a number of reasons why we think that. So the first is that local Red Cross volunteers are already active in their local community. They've signed up to the Red Cross because they want to create a change for the people who live in their area, and they have already offered their time to do so. The second is that there is currently limited connection between volunteers. After reshaping our work, a lot of these local presences left, but equally many volunteers don't actually know each other very well and don't have that kind of connection that can often come with volunteering. This also varies between service line. We know that independent living, for example, is quite a solo activity, whereas emergency response has a monthly meeting, but still that's the only real interaction between volunteers facilitated by the Red Cross. Learning from things like the volunteer experiences work. We know that volunteers have actually asked that they would like to understand and connect with peers from other service lines. They want to understand not just the independent living experience, but the whole Red Cross experience from their volunteer peers. And finally, all of these volunteers have signed up because they believe in our fundamental principles and they're aligned to our mission, which is important as we look at, as we are not very well known in any of these 3 locations, how we can get people on board in our direction. This is an important thing to have as well. So now we know who we're targeting our work towards. That meant that we had a load of assumptions that we need to now work around to see whether this would be successful. And one of our assumptions is that volunteers would like to come together more regularly in an action-oriented way. As you've seen from the previous slide, there's a lot of different things which would indicate this, but we need to validate this actual assumption. So, as you know, the innovation team, we like to get stuck in and try things before we scale them on a massive level and give it a lot of time investment. So the first thing we did is we tested this assumption. So we spoke to some of our local volunteers about their wants and experiences, to understand really what they see and what their current experiences are and how they would like that to look in the future. The majority of volunteers really wanted this to happen, and they really love the opportunity to come together more regularly. We did segment them into a number of different categories of people who are either really keen, wanted to get stuck in right from the beginning. We had a couple of volunteers who would love this, but because of personal circumstances, it wouldn't be currently on their priorities. And then we also had volunteers who would like to get involved, but maybe were more cautious and would like to wait until something was more formed before they look to get involved. This is great to understand. And as you can see from some of these quotes on the screen now, we had a lot of really passionate comments from our volunteers to show us this is a good direction for us to travel in. So for example, this one says, so one volunteer of over 20 years said, they have so much to give and nowhere to give it to. There's nothing in the area for her to carry on as a volunteer as. And a youth volunteer said, I would love the opportunity to meet as a team on a more regular basis and help create this change. They said they never hear from anyone, which is really frustrating. There's also a different experience we could talk about between existing volunteers, the number of volunteers, and also CRVs in the region and the connection between these things. All these people have signed up because they want to help their community. So how can we connect them in this action-oriented way to actually create change locally? Really excitingly, through conversations we've been having over the last few weeks, this is not something that's not only a goal and fits into the outcomes that we would like to create, but also it fits into a load of different work happening locally that you can see on the screen within the organisation, ranging from volunteer experience to our more co-production side, and also building from learnings of previous work that's been done as well around volunteers. So we're trying to really build in all of this work as we move into actually getting into the communities. But the most important thing is, I'm sure many of you are thinking, but it's not just Red Cross volunteers, there's more. What we want to do is we want to start with this target audience and grow from there. We really hope that as our testing grows, we want to keep the door open for maybe other volunteers from other charities to join us, active community members to join as well, or maybe people who've always wanted to help but never really known how the opportunity to do so. We'd like this to be an opportunity to really bring people in rather than keep it just a Red Cross space, but this is where we're starting from now, and as you can see from the little GIF on the right hand side, a place to grow from.
Great, Thanks, Charlotte. Just pick back up from Charlotte there, and hopefully you found that really interesting. We'll hopefully have a couple of minutes left still for some questions at the end in a second, but just to let you guys know what's going on next. So unfortunately, Charlotte and I both had close contacts with COVID in the last week, so we've had to rejig our next few weeks accordingly in the last few days. So next week we'll be continuing for our design sprint and testing and validating some more assumptions with the guys and starting to get ready for some of these meets to take place. And then we're going to be out testing with our volunteers from then on, as you can see, going to Neath first, then we're moving down to Camel and going out to Nelson the week after. And hopefully, as I said, we're progressing some of that testing with those groups there. And as you can see, we'll also be having some show and tells during those days. But as I said, I think we've probably now got 3 or 4 minutes for questions. If anyone's got any questions on what we've been discussing today and what Charlotte's run through, it'd be great.
Feel free to shout out or put them in the chat.
Hi Charlotte, it's Paul. I was just asked, how widespread do you think is that feeling of isolation with volunteers? You put a couple up there, but is it really quite a big challenge for us?
So I'm happy to answer that, Charlotte, if you like. So, hi, Paul. So we've obviously been speaking with people like Jester on the call now as well, and he's been working with the volunteer reps, but also Alison Faraday and some of the other gents and ladies from PNL and Volunteer Mobilisation, but also my previous role in mobility aids, which I went into just after reshaping our work. I used to obviously encounter all of my mobility aids volunteers, who have got a few on the call as well actually today, but also other service lines volunteers. And I think it's been prevalent, as we've heard from Alison and some others, certainly post reshaping our work. And although some inroads have been made in pockets, I think it's fair to say it is still a reasonably widespread issue that most volunteer managers will be able to echo.
We've also, as Erin said, we've also this feedback, particularly for our testing. So Cara, Bethan and Chloe have actually reached out to as many volunteers as they possibly can. It's not always been possible to get hold of people, but it's been a pretty widespread thing, specifically in our 3 that we've experienced ourselves, as well as Erin said from previous work as well.
Thank you.
If you do have any other burning questions that you think about later on, feel free to send us an email. I can put the emails in the chat now if you're just thinking about it, or ping us on Teams as well.
Yeah, definitely do. And I think Cara's going to drop in some links to the other show and tells that we've done, and also some of the blogs we've written previously, just for a bit more context, guys. Well, if you want to see anything more, if you are new to it and haven't been with us on some of the previous show and tells.
Thanks, Aaron. Thank you very much, Charlotte. You guys are great at your comms. The rest of us are all trying to learn from you. Cool. Anything else for the innovation team for the community approach? Going. Done. Cool. Ross, over to you. Tell us. Yep.
So hi everyone, nice to see you. So we're going to run you through just what we've been doing on the Smart Office project. Now, hopefully, we still have our team here. We have a user drop-in session happening now, so some of them have been ducking out to go and let people into various Zoom rooms and whatever. So I'm hoping that we've got the right team here to be able to talk to you. So our Smart Office team is made up of 4 of us. There's myself, who's sort of overseeing all the change management aspects. Got Renette, who's our program lead. Alison, who's our IL change owner, which is amazing because having that. Alison's normally a service manager in independent living, so having her really truly embedded into our team always keeps us on the right track, because we can't think like an IL member of staff in the same way that Alison can, which is so useful for us. And we've got Michael, who looks after all of our technical elements of the program as well. So we're going to talk you through how did we get to this point? So what did we find in discovery? And then how are we approaching our implementation from a sort of change perspective? Fundamentally, the key theme that drives through all of this is organizations don't change unless we help our people to change their ways of working. And regardless of whether we're doing an organization restructure or we're putting tablets into people's hands to help them work better, we believe that the same sort of approaches still apply, and we want to support people in that journey. So I'm going to hand over to Renette just to talk through what they found during the discovery.
Thanks, Ross. So I promise, Ross, I'll be quick because it's something that you can have quite a long discussions about the the challenges that we found. So back in 2019, we started with a discovery piece. We visited quite a lot of the independent living frontline teams just to get an understanding of what the challenges was that they experienced on a daily basis with regards to technology. And there were quite a lot of issues from the moment they arrive at the office or they switch on their device if they had one, all the way through to the end of the day. So we grouped those into the main categories. Connectivity, there were often issues in the offices or in the hospitals with the connectivity where they just couldn't log into anything. With regards to devices, they would often not have a Red Cross device, or if they did have a Red Cross device, it wouldn't be fit for purpose. So they couldn't do everything that they wanted to do from the device that they had. Network access, also a bit of a sticky point. They often work in offices in a hospital. So sometimes there's an issue. They get the everything crash and everything crashes, and they're not quite sure where in the journey it crashes. It could be NHS network that's got problems. It could be the Red Cross network that's got problems, and they don't always know who to contact. Is it the NHS team they contact? Is it the Red Cross they contact? So loads of things around that, and limitations as well. They couldn't always get to their shared information, shared folders, shared emails, etc. Another thing that we picked up is knowledge and guidance. The teams often felt that they weren't aware of what's available on the devices. If they did have a device, what can they do with it, or that type of support to learn better, more about the software on the devices. The other thing as well is working in silos, because there's such a broad area, independent living, and there's so many teams. They often felt that they work on their own, and if they do pick up a technology issue, it was always really difficult to establish if any of the other teams maybe have the same issues, and how can they reach out to other areas in independent living to learn from how they maybe fix the problems, or how they can work together to improve the technology. So those are the four main areas. We also looked at things like paperwork. There's loads of paperwork out with sensitive information, and how could that be improved, and reporting. Often they have to work from different spreadsheets and different systems to put the reporting together. So those are all the main things that we took back to the board back in at the end of 2019, and they prioritize all these issues, and that is how the tablet rollout was started. That was one of the priorities that they decided we need to look at to make the frontline workers more mobile. Ross, over to you.
Over to Alison.
It's me actually, Renette. Hi everyone. Within the scope of the project, we were looking at how we could improve the working lives for the staff and improve the experience for the service users as well, by introducing tablets to the teams. The most obvious benefit that we were going to measure was less time spent travelling. So, for instance, they would go back and forth to offices to access their emails. You would have to try and find a laptop or a desktop for someone to attend their training, or they would have to travel to the main Red Cross office, which for some teams is up to an hour away. So it was all about reducing those travel costs, and actually just giving them access to a device that they could look at their mandatory training. They could, especially last year, we found with the COVID updates coming in thick and fast, they needed to have that information at their fingertips instead of it coming through second or third hand, and they could digest that information and read it more than once. Because that happens a lot. You read it, you scan an email, and then you need to go back over it. So they were the obvious benefits that we were looking at. I think throughout the project we found that actually these have kind of evolved a bit to what our perception of how the tablets were going to help the teams. We've got some great feedback on one of the slides coming up about how they're using it in different ways within the teams that we initially hadn't even really thought of. And that's not because we didn't have a clear understanding of how they would be used, but it's just the sheer volume and variant of the services that independent living have. There's so many services. I think you kind of think of independent living as a discharge home from hospital, so a hospital service and then a community service, but actually it's really broad, the spectrum of what they're doing. And within the project, we hear of a different service every week, so we're still learning with that. Thank you, Ross.
So I'm going to quickly rattle through a couple of slides, but we're going to miss out some sections because time is running away from us. But in short, we wanted to basically get technology into frontline workers' hands. It is that simple. We just want people to access technology, and we chose to do that through tablets. By doing that, we're going to empower them to access their emails. What a novel concept. Imagine just being able to access your work emails on the go. That's a really critical thing, and that allows people to really free themselves up of traveling time that they would have otherwise had wasted. And there's a few other things in there. Accessing Zoom. We had one person who managed to cut out a 2-hour commute to a venue just to do some training by having a tablet. So there's some really impactful time savings here from using a tablet. So this is our roadmap. We do have a little ambulance which indicates where we are. So we are between 6 and 7 of the areas that we've rolled out to, with just Scotland left after that. This slide will be included though, so you'll be able to look at this in your own time. So change. This is a topic that I am the most passionate about. If you spend any more than 30 minutes with me, it's likely to have come up at some point. We are so passionate that we have to put our people first and we have to support them in how we do this. And it's important that we use a variety of different techniques to do that. So we are using a SharePoint site to hold a lot of information, and Renee's put that into the chat so you can go and check it out. There are videos. We've actually got 3 very short videos. They're about 3 or 4 minutes, where and Alison has done a huge amount of work on this, where we've gone and filmed the teams using the tablets and found out from them how they're getting on, what's the benefits, and we use them to tell our story. So rather than us telling the story about how we think they're great, we use our people to tell the story, and that's a really critical part. We're writing really engaging communications, we think, but not just that we think. On one of our emails, we got up to 94% open rate. So 94% of the people who received the email opened it. Now, to compare that, the organisation average sits around 61%, and that's for things like the Monday update that goes out to a lot of staff. So that is a real increase in terms of engagement wise, to say actually that's quite a lot of people who are engaging with the content that we're sending them, and are reading that information and digesting it. Alison, do you want to quickly talk through Change Champions?
Thanks, Ross. So one of the ways that we wanted to encourage the staff to take up the usage of the tablets is to have peer-to-peer support. So they'd be much more engaged if they had someone that they know or someone within their area that's going to support them with the use of the tablet and setting it up. So we started a community of people who we call Digital Change Champions. We support them through the change process. Ross has done a great piece of work with a bespoke learning module for them. And so they access that. We have Zoom catch-ups with them. We talk to them about resistance they've met within the teams and how they've overcome that. And we also have a really good teams chat that someone will ask a question and then lots of people will get involved. I think we're currently at about 45 people on that community chat, which is across the whole of the UK. And each time a change champion says, "Well, can I be involved?" We'll hold a quick workshop with them, get them to do the training, introduce them to the teams chat, and it just starts that sharing of information. And hopefully, once this project is disbanded, they'll stay in place and they can be involved with other projects and testing of other bits and pieces that come up. So it's been really good.
Yeah, they really are a critical part because they are that local peer support, like Alison says, which is really important for building trust. So we support our people with drop-in sessions. We have printed setup guides. We have online setup guides. We have change champions. We have our smart office email address that people can come to. My support's obviously stressed as well. So that we really have diversified all the support available through face-to-face, virtual, and all these other different means to try and make sure that, you know, change is hard, and just giving somebody a new device isn't going to change their way of working, and that's why we really needed to help and support them. So that's why we do it. Last couple of slides, and sorry, Andrew, because we are probably well over our time that we're meant to take. This is just a really critical part I just want to touch on. When we set this up, we set up the feedback cycle, which basically sets out, as a project team, how are we meant to capture all the feedback? Where do we then analyze that, and how do we act on it? So we spent time understanding what are the different user touch points. So if I'm a user, who am I going to speak to? So line managers, I've got a drop-in session available to me, change champions, all these different ways that people can access it. We collect that all into one place. So there's always one place where we have everyone's feedback. We analyze that on a weekly basis. So we had a feedback loop call just today where we go through over the past week, what are the things that we've heard about? And then that informs our next set of communications. It informs our next set of workshops with managers. So we're always tailoring and adjusting and moving forward, which is really important. And this is some feedback, which is our last slide. Alison, if there's anything in particular you want to pull out.
Not really. I would just encourage you to have a look at the SharePoint site and the videos that show some innovation within the teams of how the tablets are being used. But I'm just aware we've got 2 minutes left.
Super, yeah. And like I said, we'll share these slides round with people. But that was a very quick whistle-stop tour of Smart Office. We literally could talk for far longer, as you know, but yeah, open to any questions.
Ross, there are 1 or 2 questions in the chat if you want to pick up the ones you think are useful.
Let me open the chat a second.
Well,
I seen there was one about phone. So we have not enabled the device itself to be a phone, i.e. it does not receive incoming calls via the SIM card, although it does have a data SIM package. As George says, though, the My Collab app and Teams, you could take phone calls via that way. So if you are moving, if you're a service that's moving to the new telephony cloud-based system, which is a sort of project that's ongoing, you will be able to take calls that way. But that's mainly focused on contact centers for now. So we're probably a little bit off from our frontline workers that we are targeting, seeing the benefit of that.
Thanks, Ross. George, anything to add to that? That sounds like a meaningful integration of all the projects of telephony, and yeah, that's good. And then Alison, does that answer your question? Oh, sorry, Leslie.
I don't think Alison was asking. I think she was
Leslie. Okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? I'm curious about timelines, Ross.
Timelines? It's been a tight timeline, let me tell you. We're exhausted. So we have 8 different areas. Our last area, I think we said, is due to roll out at the beginning of August. And that, say that again, Renee?
2nd of August.
2nd of August, we're due to roll out in Scotland, but it really does take a lot of work to get to that point and to then continue that support beyond. So there's different obstacles we came across, such as because most of our team haven't been in offices, we haven't been completely aware of all the sort of building rules. Thankfully, Alison is, so helps us with that. So things like when the tablets arrive in the office, they have to be quarantined for 48 hours, 72. lip reading with Alice, hours before the tablets can then go to somebody. So that wasn't something that we'd considered in our sort of delivery schedule. So that's added on impacts. It's things like that that we're always learning about and moving on from, but they are tight, the timescales.
Great. I think we might call it a wrap. Anybody else, any quick questions or answers? Thank you very much for your time. Well done for the Smart Office email right at the end there, Ross. Thank you to the presenters, Aaron, Charlotte, Ross, Alison, Renee. And yeah, next show until 2 weeks' time. Cheers.
Thanks for having us.